Jackson Beckett never thought this mission would change his life. He was just a mid-level diplomat, not the kind of person who usually got assigned to intergalactic summits. But Earth had recently earned a seat at the table with the Viralan Consortium, one of the most advanced and mysterious alliances in the known universe. And the humans needed someone who was smart, calm, and a little unpredictable. That's how Jackson ended up aboard the Orion's Trust, Earth's main diplomatic vessel, heading toward an orbiting station near the edge of Viralan space. Everything felt stiff and formal. Jackson had spent the last 2 days practicing speeches, reviewing alien etiquette, and watching the other ambassadors walk around like they were balancing books on their heads. But inside, he was restless. He wasn't made for stiff suits and robotic handshakes. He liked real conversation. He liked people, or in this case, maybe beings. The Viralan delegation was expected at midday. Everyone stood straight, lined up, like statues in the docking bay. The room smelled like recycled air and nervous sweat. Jackson didn't know what to expect. He'd never seen a Viralan in real life. The few photos he'd seen didn't show much. Their diplomats were careful to hide their faces. Their forms always wrapped in shimmering veils and robes that seemed to shift with the light. Then the door opened with a soft hiss, and everything changed. She stepped through first, tall, elegant, unlike anyone Jackson had ever seen. Her skin had a soft, silver tone, almost metallic, with glowing lines running across her arms and neck like slow-moving rivers of light. Her eyes were sharp and full of knowledge, but not cold. She wore a long cloak made of something that looked like silk, but flickered like fire at the edges. Her head was crowned with a delicate band of glass or crystal, and her voice, when she spoke, was low and calm. "I am High Envoy Sorella of Virel Prime," she said, her gaze sweeping over the room before landing on Jackson. "And you are the human who does not speak like the others." Jackson blinked. He hadn't said a word yet. The other delegates looked confused, maybe even a little annoyed, but Sorella walked past them all and stopped directly in front of him. She tilted her head, studying his face. "I've heard you speak in recordings," she said. "You debate with energy, not formulas. You use stories instead of facts. That is rare." Jackson felt the air shift. This was not a usual diplomatic exchange. It felt more like a challenge, or maybe an invitation. "I don't believe in empty words," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "If we're going to talk about peace, I want it to mean something." Sorella smiled, just slightly. It was the kind of smile that made you forget everyone else in the room. "You and I will speak again," she said. "Alone." Then she turned and continued walking, her advisors following silently behind her. The humans remained frozen for a moment, unsure how to respond. One of the older diplomats leaned toward Jackson and whispered, "What did you do?" Jackson shrugged, but inside his thoughts were racing. Later that day, a formal meeting took place in the observation chamber. Each side spoke in turn, discussing trade routes, resource sharing, and cultural exchange. The talks were polite, careful, and, in Jackson's opinion, painfully dull. He sat quietly, only speaking when asked, but he noticed that Sorella kept looking his way. Not often, just enough to make him notice. After the session ended, he found a message waiting in his quarters. It was brief. "There is more to understand. Join me in the sunroom at the 3rd cycle." There was no signature, but he knew who it was from. He wasn't sure if this was protocol or if he was breaking some kind of rule, but curiosity got the better of him. When the time came, he walked to the sunroom, a quiet part of the ship designed for reflection, with wide windows showing stars, and nebulas swirling far outside. She was already there, seated on a curved bench, her cloak folded beside her. Without the full regalia, she looked different, more real. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said without looking at him. I wasn't sure I was allowed, he replied. Sorella laughed softly. You are not my prisoner, Jackson Beckett. You are my curiosity. He sat beside her, unsure what to say. There was a long pause, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I've studied many humans, she said. Your kind races forward, always building, always reaching, but often missing the reason why. What reason do you think we're missing? She turned to face him. Connection. You build machines faster than trust. You seek control more than understanding. He nodded slowly. You're not wrong. You are different, she said again. Your voice holds feeling, purpose. He smiled. Most people say I talk too much. Perhaps. But I would rather speak with someone who feels than someone who simply repeats data. The conversation went on for hours. They didn't discuss treaties or trade. They talked about their lives, their homes, their fears, and strange dreams they'd had. It felt easy. Too easy for a first meeting between two very different worlds. When he stood to leave, she touched his wrist gently. Next time, she said, I will show you something your species has never seen. A gift. Power, perhaps. Or pleasure. Jackson raised an eyebrow. Why offer me those things? Sorella paused. Because I want to know what you'll choose. Jackson couldn't sleep that night. The stars outside his window felt closer somehow, like they were listening. He kept thinking about what Sorella had said before he left the sunroom. A gift. Power, perhaps. Or pleasure. The words repeated in his mind, not because they were tempting, but because of how she had said them, with meaning, but not pressure. She was testing him, or maybe just watching to see how he'd react. He didn't fully understand it, but something about her pulled at him, not just her strange beauty or quiet strength, but the way she looked at him like he mattered, like she expected more from him than just another negotiation. The next morning, another message arrived. It was brief, again with no signature, but he recognized the formal tone mixed with a personal touch. You will find what you seek in the chamber below the arboretum. Come before the lights change. It was strange. Almost poetic. Jackson hesitated only for a moment before getting dressed. He didn't tell anyone. Whatever this was, it didn't feel like something to share with the others. He followed the soft lights of the corridor until he reached a narrow door beneath the ship's arboretum, a small forest-like room used by the diplomats for quiet walks. The door opened with a soft sound and he stepped inside. The room was dim, quiet, and filled with a soft blue glow. In the center stood Sorella, wearing something simpler than before, a long silver tunic and loose fabric that moved like mist. Around her floated small, translucent spheres that pulsed with light. They moved on their own, dancing slowly in the air like jellyfish. You came, she said, not surprised. You asked, Jackson replied, stepping closer. This room is called the Listening Hall, she said. It responds to thought, to intention. It was once used by our scientists to explore emotional energy. Now it's forgotten, mostly. He looked around, amazed. It's beautiful. Sorella stepped aside, and the orbs began to gather near Jackson. He felt a soft warmth as one hovered near his chest, reacting to something he didn't quite understand. These are memory spheres, she explained. They hold fragments of experience, echoes of feeling. If you touch one, it may show you something. Not always clearly, but truthfully. Jackson slowly reached out and let his fingers touch the nearest sphere. A rush of images filled his mind, not words, not exact pictures, but emotions. A great battle lost, a lonely planet, a farewell that was never spoken. It felt sad, deep, and strangely human. He stepped back, taking a deep breath. That was intense. Sorella nodded. That one holds the memory of our first failure as a people. A moment of great sorrow. Jackson looked at her. Why show me this? Because I want you to know who we truly are, she said softly. Not just what we present at summits and in treaties. I offer you power, yes, but not the kind most ask for. The power to understand, the power to feel what others hide. He let her words sink in. Around them, the spheres floated quietly again, as if listening to the silence between thoughts. Then, with a wave of her hand, Sorella made them drift to the side, revealing something behind them, a small, cube-shaped device resting on a low pedestal. This, she said, is what most visitors ask for, a neural amplifier. It heightens mental processing, sharpens decision-making, even slows time perception in high-stress moments. To your kind, it would be considered a weapon or a crown. Jackson walked toward it but didn't touch it. And you're offering this to me? He asked, cautious. I offer it, she said calmly, but I do not suggest it. Too many who take it lose their path. They begin to believe that speed is wisdom, that strength is control, but that's not why I brought you here. He turned to face her. Then why? Sorella stepped closer, her expression changing. For the first time, she seemed unsure. I've watched many diplomats, she said. Most want to take, to win, to own, but you waited, you listened. You asked me why, not just what. That is rare. Jackson felt the air change again. There was something heavy in the space between them now, not dangerous, just important. He studied the neural amplifier for a moment longer, then looked back at her. I'm not interested in shortcuts, he said. I'm not here to be someone's project or pawn. She stared at him for a long second, and then she smiled. A real smile this time, soft, a little surprised. I believed you would say, that, she said. He stepped closer. You offered me power and pleasure, but I want to ask something different. Sorella tilted her head, curious. What is it? He met her gaze without hesitation. Do your people dance? The room fell completely silent. The spheres stopped moving. Sorella blinked once, as if she didn't understand the question at first. Then something in her face changed. A strange look passed over her, a pause, almost like someone caught off guard. Her glowing tattoos dimmed slightly. Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. You ask for a dance? She said finally, her voice almost a whisper. Jackson nodded. Yes, just that. She looked down for a brief moment, and when she looked up again, there was color, actual color, in her cheeks. Not bright, but visible. She was blushing. No one had ever seen a Virelan blush before, not in any record, not in all the briefings. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she looked away, as if she didn't want him to see her reaction. But he had already seen enough. Jackson didn't press. He just gave a small smile and turned to leave. Before he reached the door, she called softly, Perhaps next time. And, in that moment, Jackson realized he had already been given something far greater than technology or power. He had been given trust. Jackson walked slowly through the ship's corridor, still thinking about what had just happened. He had expected more talks, more formal offers, maybe even pressure to accept some advanced alien gift. But instead, he had seen something no one else had. A part of Sorella that was not a leader, not a diplomat, but something much more personal. A blush, a moment of true emotion. He didn't fully understand what it meant yet, but he knew it mattered. And he couldn't stop thinking about. Back in his quarters, he poured himself a cup of warm tea and sat near the window. The stars outside blinked quietly, like silent watchers of all the small and strange things that happened aboard the ship. Sorella had said, "Perhaps next time." That was not a no, but it also wasn't a yes. She had seemed surprised, almost nervous. That small reaction told him more than any speech ever could. The next day was filled with scheduled meetings and shared meals between the humans and Virelans. Jackson joined in as required, but his mind wandered more than once. He caught Sorella looking at him during a diplomatic discussion, though only for a second. She didn't speak to him the entire day, but her eyes said more than words could. Later, just after dinner, Jackson stepped into the Arboretum. It was quiet there, just the soft hum of the ship's systems and the gentle rustling of leaves from the artificial breeze. He walked slowly among the glowing plants, trying to calm his thoughts. That's when he saw her. Sorella stood near a small tree with violet leaves. Her back was to him, but she didn't seem surprised when he walked up. "You came again," she said without turning. "I didn't know you would be here," he replied honestly. "Perhaps that is why you always find me," she said softly. They stood there for a while in silence, side by side, watching the leaves move. After a moment, Jackson turned toward her. "Did I say something wrong yesterday?" She looked at him, puzzled. "No, you said something unexpected." "Is that worse?" She gave a small laugh. "No, Jackson, it's just rare. Most who meet me want something they think will make them stronger or more important. You asked for something simple, and yet it unsettled me." He nodded, understanding. "Maybe it's because dancing isn't about power. It's about closeness." She turned fully toward him now. Her expression was calm, but something in her eyes was unguarded. "There is no dance in Virelian tradition," she said. "At least not in the way you mean it. We have ceremonial gestures, rituals, and motions of greeting, but not something that exists only for connection." Jackson stepped closer. "Would you like to learn?" She hesitated. "I do not know." "How?" she admitted. "I can show you," he said gently. "If you want." She looked around. No one else was there. The Arboretum was quiet, peaceful. She nodded, very slowly. Jackson reached out his hand. Sorella stared at it like it was something dangerous, then slowly placed her own hand in his. It was warm, delicate but steady. "Just follow my steps," he said. They stood close now, barely a breath apart. Jackson led gently, moving with slow, simple steps. It wasn't a real dance, not one with music or practiced moves, but something softer. A quiet rhythm between two people who had begun to understand each other. Sorella's movements were unsure, at first. Her foot caught on a root. She let out a quiet sound of frustration, but Jackson just smiled. "You're doing fine," he said. "You say that even though I almost stepped on you," she replied, her tone dry but amused. "That's part of it," he said. "It's not about doing it perfectly, it's about being here." She relaxed slightly and moved again, this time more fluidly. They made small circles beneath the artificial sky, her robe catching the soft light as she turned. "I've never done this before," she said quietly. "I know," Jackson replied. "Thank you for trusting me." A long pause followed. "Jackson," she began, but then stopped. "Yes?" She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering slightly. "Why did you really ask me to dance?" He considered the question. "Because I wanted to see who you were," he said. "Not just your title or your knowledge. I wanted to know the person behind the cloak, and I wanted you to know me, too." Her grip on his hand tightened slightly, just for a moment. "I did not expect this," she whispered. "What did you expect?" "I thought I would offer power and watch you take it. I thought you would chase something great. But instead, you asked for something small, something gentle. And that frightened me more than anything." Jackson stopped moving. He looked at her closely. "Why would that frighten you?" "Because it makes me feel," she said. "And feelings are not something I was trained to use. He nodded. Maybe it's time you stopped leading with training. They stood there for a while, not dancing anymore, just holding on. The lights of the arboretum dimmed slightly, marking the ship's night cycle. Sorella looked around and then back at him. If we had met in another place, another life, do you think this moment would still happen? I think some moments find us no matter where we are, Jackson replied. We just have to say yes to them. She gave a small smile, the kind that came from somewhere deep and true. Then I say yes. The next few days passed in a quiet rhythm, but something had changed. Jackson continued attending the diplomatic meetings, sitting with the Earth delegation as they discussed terms with the Virilan advisors. From the outside, everything looked the same: calm discussions, careful negotiations, respectful exchanges. But for Jackson, the world now felt different. Something invisible had begun to connect him and Sorella, something unspoken but deeply real. They didn't meet publicly after the dance in the Arboretum. It seemed both of them knew it was better not to draw attention. But late in the ship's quiet hours, he would find small signs. A message left in the language of symbols, a small blue crystal placed outside his quarters. One morning, a folded piece of soft cloth that carried the scent of the Virilan forests. She was speaking without words, and he was learning how to listen. Then, near the end of the summit, Jackson received another message. Tonight, top deck, when the stars are in line, come alone. It was short and strange, just like the others, but this one felt more serious. He arrived at the top deck a few minutes early. The observation dome opened above him, revealing a perfect view of space. Stars stretched in every direction. In the distance, a gas giant spun slowly near a pale moon. The silence felt heavy, like something important was about to happen. Sorella stood near the edge of the glass wall, dressed in a deep violet cloak. Her hands were behind her back. She didn't turn when he arrived, but she knew he was there. I've asked to delay the final signing ceremony, she said softly. Jackson stepped closer, confused. Why? Because once the treaty is signed, she said, you'll be sent back to Earth, and I won't be able to speak to you like this again. Her voice didn't sound cold or formal. It sounded uncertain, even quiet. Jackson stopped, beside her. You're the High Envoy. You can visit Earth any time. She shook her head. Not the way I want to. Not without questions, not without people watching. A long silence followed. Then she reached into her cloak and pulled out a small silver object. It was smooth, about the size of a pebble, and it glowed faintly. This is a memory core, she said. It holds the record of our shared moments, our talks, the dance, even this conversation. I created it myself. Jackson stared at the object, surprised. You recorded everything? Not with machines, she said. With intention. Our thoughts and feelings leave traces. Virilan minds can gather them under special conditions. Jackson didn't know what to say. I want you to have it, she said. When you return to Earth. He looked at her closely. Why give me something this personal? She finally turned toward him. Because you gave me something I didn't know I wanted, she said. You gave me a moment where I wasn't a leader or a symbol. I was just a person. He accepted the memory core, holding it carefully in his hand. It felt warm, like it remembered being part of something alive. Sorella looked up at the stars. When I was young, I was told emotions would weaken me, that caring too much would cloud my mind, but now I wonder if caring is the only thing that makes us strong. Jackson nodded. Feelings don't make you weak. They make you real. She gave a quiet smile. Then I want to be real with you, at least once more. She stepped forward and lifted her hand. A moment later, the lights above the deck dimmed. A low hum filled the air, and soft patterns began to appear across the floor, circles of light slowly moving in rhythm. It was not music exactly, but it had a flow, like a heartbeat turned into sound. "This is the closest thing we have to dance," she said. "We call it the memory gesture." Jackson stepped onto the glowing patterns. "I remember you mentioned it." She nodded. "We use it when we want to share something that cannot be spoken." She extended her hand. He took it without hesitation. Together they began to move, slowly, carefully, as the lights followed their steps. It wasn't the kind of dancing Jackson had learned on Earth. There were no turns or spins. It was more like moving through a story, each motion quiet but full of meaning. As they stepped across the deck, Jackson felt memories rushing in, not just his own, but glimpses of hers. A lonely child, trained from birth to lead, a heavy robe placed on young shoulders, quiet nights staring out windows, wondering what lay beyond duty. Then later, laughter with him, shared questions, warmth. He realized she was sharing pieces of her heart, one movement at a time. At the center of the dance, she paused and looked at him. "If I asked you to stay," she said quietly, "what would you say?" Jackson's breath caught. "I don't know," he admitted. "I didn't expect any of this. I came here for a mission. Now I feel like I found something I didn't know I was missing." She nodded slowly, accepting his honesty. "I won't ask you now," she said. "But when the time comes, I want you to choose for yourself, not for duty, not for peace, just for you." The dance ended. The lights faded, but the feeling remained. They stood there in the quiet, looking at each other, not as diplomat and envoy, not as human and alien, but as two people caught in something neither had planned. He held the memory core tightly. "I'll keep this safe," he promised. Sorella nodded. "And I'll remember the dance." The day of the treaty signing arrived with quiet ceremony. Delegates from Earth and Varel Prime gathered in the Grand Hall, a vast space filled with light and intricate symbols from both cultures. Jackson sat with the Earth delegation, but his thoughts were not on the speech or the carefully worded agreements. They were on Sorella, on what she had shared and what she had offered. The memory core rested safely in his pocket. He had not opened it yet. He wasn't ready. For now, it was a symbol of everything that had changed between them: trust, connection, and something deeper that neither had fully spoken aloud. When the time came, Sorella stood beside the other. Delegates, her usual commanding presence softened by something new. As she looked toward Jackson, he saw that same quiet strength he had come to respect, but also a vulnerability, like she was waiting for something unspoken. The ceremony was brief and formal. Words were exchanged, seals were placed, and hands were shaken. Cameras and recording devices captured the moment, but Jackson felt detached from the official acts. His attention was elsewhere. Later, as the guests celebrated and exchanged polite congratulations, Sorella found him. She slipped through the crowd with quiet grace and motioned for him to follow. They walked away from the noise toward the ship's quieter areas. Jackson could see the stars again through the windows, stretching endlessly. She stopped near a simple bench and looked at him. "I have something for you," she said softly. Jackson reached into his pocket and pulled out the memory core. He held it in his palm, feeling the warmth and faint pulse of light. "I wanted you to have this before you left," she said. "Not just as a record, but as a reminder." "Of what?" he asked. "Of the moments we shared," she replied. "The talks, the dance, the choices. When you feel alone or uncertain, this will help you remember that connection." Jackson looked at her. He realized that connection was exactly what he had been searching for, not in politics or power, but in something human and real. He smiled. "Thank you." She returned the smile, but then her expression grew serious. "Jackson," she said, "there is something else." He waited, sensing that whatever came next would change everything. "I cannot leave this station," she said. "My people expect me to return, to continue as their leader." But I want more than that. I want a life that is not just duty and ceremony. Jackson's heart quickened. He had felt it before, the desire for something beyond expectation. I want you to come with me, she said quietly. To Varel Prime, not as a diplomat, but as my guest. To see who I am when the robes are gone. He stared at her, unsure if this was a dream or reality. Do you want to? She asked. Jackson took a deep breath. The mission was over. But this was a new beginning. Yes, he said simply. Sorella's eyes shone with relief and hope. We will leave soon, she said. There is much to show you. As they stood together, the stars outside seemed to shine brighter. The universe felt vast, but for the first time, Jackson did not feel small or lost. He had come to the summit as a diplomat, but he was leaving with something far greater. Trust, friendship, and the possibility of a future neither had expected. The memory core pulsed softly in his hand, a symbol of everything they had shared. And as the ship moved through the silent void of space, Jackson knew that whatever lay ahead, he and Sorella would face it together.